Maya Rodriguez was a 23-year-old college student who loved sharing her daily life with her followers on social media. She had built a small but loyal community of about 15,000 people who tuned in regularly to watch her cooking streams, study sessions, and casual chats about life. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, Maya decided to go live while she waited for her younger brother outside his high school. She parked her old Honda Civic under a large oak tree and propped her phone on the dashboard. The autumn sun filtered through the golden leaves as Maya chatted with her viewers about her plans for the evening. She was making tacos for dinner and asked her audience for recipe suggestions. Comments flooded in with different ideas about seasonings and toppings. Maya laughed at some of the creative combinations people suggested. Everything felt normal and peaceful. Her brother's school was in a quiet neighborhood where families walked their dogs and kids rode bicycles on the sidewalks. Maya had picked him up from this same spot dozens of times before without any issues. She glanced at the time on her phone. Her brother would be out in about 10 minutes. She continued talking to her viewers, showing them the grocery bags in her passenger seat filled with fresh vegetables and tortillas. Suddenly, a police cruiser pulled up directly behind her car. Maya noticed it in her rearview mirror but didn't think much of it at first. She assumed the officer was just patrolling the area near the school. But then she saw him get out of his vehicle and start walking toward her car. Her heart began to beat a little faster. She had done nothing wrong. She was legally parked in a public spot, not blocking any driveways or traffic. The officer approached her driver's side window. Maya could see he was a white man in his late 40s with a stern expression on his face. His name tag read, Officer Mitchell. She rolled down her window politely and smiled, though she felt nervous. Her phone was still propped up on the dashboard, and her live stream was capturing everything. Officer Mitchell leaned down and looked into her car without greeting her. His eyes scanned the interior with suspicion. Maya's viewers were watching in real time, and the comment section started filling up with concern. People were asking what was happening and telling Maya to be careful. "What are you doing here?" Officer Mitchell asked in a harsh tone. There was no politeness in his voice, no standard greeting that most officers give during routine interactions. Maya tried to keep her voice steady. "I'm just waiting for my brother. He goes to school here. He'll be out in a few minutes." Officer Mitchell's expression didn't soften. Instead, he looked even more suspicious. "You got ID? Registration?" Maya felt confused. She hadn't been pulled over for a traffic violation. She was parked and waiting. But she knew better than to argue with a police officer, especially one who seemed hostile from the start. She reached slowly for her purse, making sure to announce what she was doing. "I'm getting my wallet from my purse," she said clearly. As she pulled out her driver's license and reached for the registration in her glove compartment, Officer Mitchell suddenly stepped back and put his hand on his weapon. Maya froze. Her viewers were now flooding the comments with panic and anger. Many were recording the stream on their own devices, sensing that something wrong was happening. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Officer Mitchell barked. His voice was loud and aggressive, completely disproportionate to the situation. Maya's hands were shaking now. She held her license up so he could see it clearly. "I'm just getting my registration like you asked," she said, her voice cracking slightly. "It's in the glove compartment." Officer Mitchell snatched her license from her hand and barely looked at it. He shone his flashlight into her car even though it was broad daylight. The beam passed over her grocery bags, her backpack, and the phone on the dashboard that was still streaming everything. "What's that?" he demanded, pointing at her phone. "I'm on a live stream," Maya explained. "I was just talking to my followers while I wait for my brother." This seemed to make Officer Mitchell even angrier. His face reddened, and he leaned closer to the window. "Turn that off right now," he ordered. Maya knew she had the right to record police interactions in public. Many of her viewers were typing this in the comments, encouraging her to keep streaming. "I have the right to record," she said quietly, trying not to sound confrontational. Officer Mitchell's jaw tightened. What he said next would shock thousands of viewers and eventually millions more. "You people always think you know the law. You're in a suspicious vehicle in a nice neighborhood. You don't belong here." The words hung in the air. Maya felt her stomach drop. You people, you don't belong here. She lived just 3 miles away from this school. She had every right to be there. But Officer Mitchell had made an assumption about her based solely on how she looked. Her brown skin and her old car had apparently been enough for him to decide she was a criminal. The comments on her live stream exploded. Viewers were outraged. Some were calling the police department's non-emergency line in real time. Others were sharing the stream across different social media platforms. Within minutes, hundreds more people were tuning in to watch what was happening. Maya took a deep breath. She was scared, but she also knew she had thousands of witnesses. Officer, I haven't done anything wrong. I'm just waiting for my brother. His name is Carlos Rodriguez. He's in the 10th grade here. Officer Mitchell ignored her explanation. Instead, he walked around to the passenger side of her car and tried to open the door. It was locked. He knocked on the window hard, making Maya jump. Open this door, he commanded. Do I have to? Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her viewers were telling her she didn't have to let him search her car without probable cause. Open it or I'll arrest you for obstruction, Officer Mitchell threatened. His hand was still resting on his weapon, a silent but clear intimidation tactic. Maya felt trapped. She knew what the law said, but she also knew that situations like this could escalate dangerously. Young people who looked like her had ended up hurt, or worse for less. She reached over and unlocked the passenger door with trembling fingers. Officer Mitchell opened the door and began searching through her grocery bags. He pulled out tomatoes, onions, and packages of tortillas, setting them roughly on the seat. He opened her backpack and dumped out her textbooks and notebooks. Viewers watched in disbelief as he violated her privacy and dignity, for no legitimate reason. Then he found her wallet in the backpack. He opened it and pulled out the $60 she had inside, money she had saved from her part-time job at a local coffee shop. He held it up to the light as if checking for counterfeit bills. Where did this money come from? He asked accusingly. Maya couldn't believe what she was hearing. From my job. I work at Coffee Corner on Main Street. Officer Mitchell pocketed her license and kept looking through her belongings. The live stream continued recording every moment. By now, nearly 5,000 people were watching live and the number kept climbing. Screenshots and recordings were being shared across every social media platform. Local news outlets had already been tagged in multiple posts. Just then, Maya's brother Carlos appeared at her window. He was 15 years old, wearing his school backpack and looking confused. Maya, what's going on? He asked. Officer Mitchell immediately turned his attention to Carlos. Stay back, he ordered. Carlos looked frightened but stood his ground. That's my sister. She picks me up every day. Other students were starting to come out of the school now. Some stopped to watch what was happening. A few pulled out their own phones and started recording. Parents waiting in other cars began to notice the scene. One mother got out of her SUV and started walking toward them, her face concerned. Officer Mitchell seemed to realize he had an audience now beyond just the live stream. But instead of backing down, he doubled down on his actions. He turned back to Maya, who was still sitting in her car with tears streaming down her face. You match the description of someone involved in drug activity in this area, he said loudly, clearly performing for the gathering crowd. This was a lie, and everyone watching knew it. There had been no radio call, no description mentioned before he approached her. He had stopped her for no reason other than racial bias, and now he was trying to justify his actions after the fact. The mother who had approached spoke up. Officer, I've seen this young woman pick up her brother here many times. She's not causing any trouble. Several other parents nodded in agreement. One father called out, This is harassment. We've all been watching on the live stream. You had no reason to stop her. Officer Mitchell's face grew even redder. He was trapped by his own actions, caught on camera by thousands of witnesses, and now confronted by members of the very community he claimed to be protecting. But he wasn't ready to admit his mistake. Pride and prejudice kept him locked in his aggressive stance. What Officer Mitchell didn't know was that karma was already in motion. The live stream had been shared so many times that it had caught the attention of not just local news but also the police department's internal affairs division, civil rights attorneys, and even the mayor's office. His career was about to change forever, and not in the way he expected. The crowd around Maya's car continued to grow. Students, parents, and even some teachers who had stayed late were now watching the situation unfold. Most had their phones out, creating multiple angles of documentation. Officer Mitchell stood there with Maya's license still in his hand, clearly trying to figure out his next move. He had painted himself into a corner with his own actions and words. Maya remained in her car, her hands visible on the steering wheel where Officer Mitchell could see them. Her Livestream viewer count had exploded to over 20,000 people. The comments were moving so fast they were barely readable. People from across the country were watching this young woman being harassed for simply waiting for her brother. Many viewers had already filed complaints with the police department. Others were contacting local news stations and civil rights organizations. Carlos stood close to his sister's car, his young face showing a mixture of fear and anger. He had heard the officer's words. "You people, you don't belong here." Those words would stay with him for a long time. He had grown up in this neighborhood. He walked these streets every day, yet this officer had decided that his sister, who looked like him, was somehow a threat that needed to be investigated. Officer Mitchell's radio crackled to life. A dispatcher's voice came through asking for his status. He grabbed the radio from his belt and turned away from the crowd to respond. His voice was lower now, harder to hear, but several people in the crowd had caught the exchange on their recordings. The dispatcher hadn't sent him to this location. He had stopped Maya completely on his own initiative, which meant there had been no call about suspicious activity. His story was falling apart in real time. A woman in business attire pushed through the small crowd. She was Claire Thompson, a local attorney who had just picked up her daughter from the school. She had been watching the live stream on her phone while sitting in her car and recognized the location immediately. As a civil rights lawyer with 15 years of experience, she knew exactly what she was witnessing. She approached Officer Mitchell with her business card already in her hand. "Officer, I'm attorney Claire Thompson. I'm advising this young woman not to answer any more questions without legal representation present," she announced clearly. Her voice was calm but firm, the voice of someone who had dealt with situations like this many times before. Officer Mitchell turned to face her, his expression showing irritation. "This doesn't concern you, ma'am. Please step back." Claire didn't move. "This concerns every citizen who cares about constitutional rights. This young woman has committed no crime. She was legally parked on a public street. You've searched her vehicle without probable cause, and your statements were recorded by thousands of witnesses." She gestured toward the phones pointed in their direction. The officer's jaw tightened. He looked at the crowd, then back at Claire, then at the phone on Maya's dashboard still streaming everything. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. He was a veteran officer with nearly 20 years on the force. He had been through training on constitutional rights, on proper procedures, on community relations. But in this moment, his biases had overridden all of that training, and now he was facing the consequences. Another police cruiser pulled up. A younger officer got out, looking confused about what he was walking into. He was Officer James Park, a Korean-American officer who had been on the force for just 3 years. He had seen Maya's live stream on his phone while finishing up paperwork at the station. Several people had tagged the police department in shares of the video. He had decided to respond to the location on his own, sensing that the situation needed intervention. Officer Park approached cautiously. He could see the crowd, the phones, and the tension in Officer Mitchell's body language. "Everything okay here, Mitchell?" he asked. "Fine," Officer Mitchell snapped. "Just doing a routine check." Officer Park looked at Maya in her car, her tear-stained face and frightened eyes. He looked at the scattered groceries on the passenger seat. He looked at the teenage boy standing protectively near the vehicle. This didn't look routine at all. He pulled Officer Mitchell aside, away from the crowd and away from the phones. Their conversation was brief but heated. The crowd couldn't hear what was being said, but they could see Officer Mitchell's face growing redder and his gestures becoming more agitated. Officer Park remained calm, occasionally pointing toward Maya's car and then toward the phones recording everything. He was clearly trying to get his fellow officer to understand the situation he had created. While the two officers talked, Claire approached Maya's car window. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. Maya nodded, though tears continued to stream down her face. "I didn't do anything wrong," she whispered. "I know," Claire assured her. "And we have proof. Keep your live stream going. Don't turn it off. This is your protection right now." Carlos leaned in closer. "Is Maya going to get arrested?" His voice cracked with worry. "No," Claire said firmly. "She hasn't broken any laws. But I need you both to stay calm and let me handle this." Across the parking lot, the conversation between the two officers concluded. Officer Park walked back toward Maya's car with a professional expression that didn't give away what had been discussed. Officer Mitchell followed behind him, his face now showing clear anger mixed with something else that might have been embarrassment or fear. Officer Park addressed Maya directly. "Ma'am, I apologize for this situation. You're free to go. We have no reason to detain you." The crowd erupted in a mixture of relief and continued anger. Some people cheered. Others shouted about filing complaints. The energy was intense, months or even years of accumulated frustration about similar incidents finding release in this moment. But Officer Mitchell wasn't done. Pride and prejudice still clouded his judgment. "She matches a description," he insisted, speaking to Officer Park but loud enough for everyone to hear. Officer Park's expression hardened. There was no call, no description. "I checked with dispatch." The crowd's noise grew louder. People were openly calling Officer Mitchell a liar now. Parents were expressing outrage that this had happened in front of a school where their children could have witnessed or experienced similar treatment. The teachers present were discussing how they would address this incident with their students. Officer Mitchell realized he had lost complete control of the situation. In a last desperate attempt to save face, he made a decision that would seal his fate. He reached for his handcuffs. "She's being detained for obstruction," he announced. The crowd's reaction was immediate and explosive. People surged forward, not threatening, but making their presence known. Voices overlapped in protest. Claire stepped directly between Officer Mitchell and Maya's car. "On what grounds?" she demanded. "She's complied with every instruction. She provided identification. She explained why she was here. You have no legal basis for detention." Officer Park put his hand on Officer Mitchell's shoulder. "Don't do this," he said quietly but urgently. "Stand down." Maya's live stream viewers were having a collective meltdown in the comments. The viewer count had now exceeded 30,000 people. News trucks were being dispatched to the location. The police chief had been notified. The mayor's office had received hundreds of calls. What Officer Mitchell didn't know was that his actions had already triggered a chain reaction that extended far beyond this parking lot. A black sedan pulled into the school parking lot, driving carefully through the crowd. The driver was Captain Rodriguez of the police department's Internal Affairs Division. He had been watching the live stream from his office and had immediately recognized the potential for a catastrophic situation. He was also Maya's uncle, though he hadn't seen his niece in several years due to family distance. When he recognized her voice and face on the viral video, his heart had sunk. Captain Rodriguez got out of his car and his presence immediately changed the dynamics. He was in full uniform with his captain's bars clearly visible. Both Officer Mitchell and Officer Park snapped to attention. The crowd quieted slightly, watching to see what would happen next. "Officer Mitchell, step away from the vehicle," Captain Rodriguez ordered. His voice carried the weight of authority earned through 25 years of service and a reputation for fairness. Officer Mitchell's face went pale as he recognized the captain. He took several steps back from Maya's car, his hand dropping away from his handcuffs. Captain Rodriguez approached Maya's window. When their eyes met, recognition flashed between them. "Maya?" he said softly. "Uncle David?" Maya's voice was barely audible. The crowd murmured with this new development. The live stream comments exploded with speculation about the relationship between the captain and the young woman who had been harassed. Captain Rodriguez took a deep breath. This was personal now in ways that complicated everything, but his duty was clear. He turned to address the crowd. "I apologize on behalf of the police department for what has occurred here. This young woman has done nothing wrong. She will not be detained. Officer Mitchell, you're to return to the station immediately. We will discuss this matter there." Officer Mitchell opened his mouth to protest but thought better of it. He turned and walked stiffly back to his cruiser. As he drove away, the crowd watched in silence, many still recording. The first battle had been won. But everyone present knew this was far from over. What none of them could have predicted was how far the ripples from this incident would spread. The Livestream had been shared across every major social media platform. It was being discussed on news networks. Civil rights organizations were preparing statements, and Officer Mitchell's past was about to be examined in ways he never imagined. The karma he had set in motion with his racist actions was just beginning to manifest. The evening news opened with Maya's live-stream footage. Major networks across the country picked up the story. The video of Officer Mitchell's interaction with Maya played on repeat, each time highlighting his words, his aggressive stance, and his complete lack of probable cause. Legal experts appeared on television to break down exactly what had gone wrong and what constitutional rights had been violated. The public reaction was swift and overwhelming. Within 24 hours, the hashtag Justice for Maya was trending nationwide. The livestream had been viewed over 5 million times across different platforms. Thousands of people shared their own stories of similar encounters with law enforcement. The incident had touched a nerve that went far beyond one young woman waiting for her brother after school. At the police department headquarters, Captain David Rodriguez sat in a conference room with the police chief, the city's attorney, and several internal affairs investigators. They had spent hours reviewing not just Maya's livestream, but also the footage from Officer Mitchell's body camera, which told an even more damning story. The body cam showed Officer Mitchell deliberately turning off his camera's audio moments before approaching Maya's car. This was a clear violation of department policy and suggested premeditation in hiding whatever he planned to do or say. "How long has Mitchell been with us?" Chief Williams asked, though he already knew the answer. 19 years, Captain Rodriguez replied. He had pulled Officer Mitchell's complete personnel file, and what he found there painted a disturbing picture. The file contained 17 complaints over the years, all from citizens of color. Most had been dismissed after cursory investigations with no real follow-up. But looking at them now with fresh eyes and heightened awareness, patterns emerged. Officer Mitchell had a history of stopping people in affluent neighborhoods who he deemed didn't belong there. He had been accused of using excessive force during routine traffic stops. Multiple people had claimed he used racial slurs, though these complaints had been dismissed for lack of corroboration. Why weren't these red flags before? Chief Williams demanded, his frustration evident. He had been chief for only 2 years and had inherited a department with deep-rooted problems he was still trying to address. The city's attorney, Jennifer Park, spoke up. Because the culture didn't treat them as red flags. These complaints were filed before the department implemented body cameras, before social media made everything instantly public, and during a time when the word of an officer was rarely questioned. She paused, looking at the file in front of her. But now we have undeniable evidence of racial profiling, illegal search, and abuse of authority. And it's been seen by millions of people. Captain Rodriguez added another detail that had emerged from their investigation. I spoke with several officers who have worked with Mitchell over the years. Off the record, 3 of them admitted they've heard him make racist comments in the locker room. One said Mitchell once bragged about making life difficult for people he thought didn't belong in certain neighborhoods. Chief Williams closed his eyes briefly. This was worse than he had thought. What's our exposure here legally? Jennifer didn't sugarcoat it. Massive. Maya has grounds for a civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983. The fact that this was recorded and went viral means we can't claim it was a misunderstanding or a miscommunication. We have an officer on camera racially profiling a young woman, conducting an illegal search, threatening false arrest, and lying about having a description of a suspect. Any jury would rule against the city. What about criminal charges against Mitchell? Captain Rodriguez asked. The district attorney is reviewing the case now, Jennifer replied. Deprivation of rights under color of law is a federal crime. The FBI's Civil Rights Division has already reached out to our office. They're considering whether to pursue charges. As this meeting took place, Maya sat in Attorney Claire Thompson's office with her mother, her brother Carlos, and her uncle David. Claire had taken on Maya's case pro bono, recognizing both its importance and its potential to create meaningful change. Maya's mother, Elena Rodriguez, held her daughter's hand tightly, her eyes red from crying. I should have been there, Elena said for the 10th time. She had been at work when everything happened and had learned about it from the viral video before Maya could even call her. "It's not your fault, Mom," Maya assured her. "Nobody could have predicted this." Claire spread several documents across her desk. "Maya, I want you to understand what we're dealing with here. This case has become much bigger than just one incident. The attention it's receiving means we have an opportunity to push for real systemic change, not just individual accountability." "What do you mean?" Maya asked. "We can file a lawsuit against not just Officer Mitchell but the police department itself. We can argue that their failure to properly address previous complaints created a culture where this kind of behavior was allowed to continue. We can push for policy changes, better training, and stronger accountability measures." David leaned forward. "The department is already implementing changes. The chief announced this morning that all officers will undergo mandatory retraining on racial bias and constitutional rights. Body cameras can no longer be turned off during any public interaction. And we're creating a civilian review board to investigate complaints against officers." "That's a start," Claire acknowledged. "But we need to ensure these aren't just empty promises made to calm public outrage. We need these changes written into policy with real consequences for violations." Carlos, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, finally spoke. "What's going to happen to that cop? The one who did this to Maya?" The adults exchanged glances. David answered carefully. "Officer Mitchell has been suspended without pay pending the internal investigation. Based on what we've found, I can tell you that he will almost certainly be terminated. The question is whether he'll also face criminal charges." "Good," Carlos said firmly. The incident had changed him. He had always trusted police officers, had been taught to respect them and see them as helpers. But watching his sister cry in her car while an officer violated her rights had shattered that innocent trust. He was now part of a generation that had witnessed too many similar incidents, and it was shaping how he viewed authority. Meanwhile, Officer Mitchell sat in his living room, his career crumbling around him. His lawyer, Michael Stevens, had just left after delivering devastating news. The police union had decided not to fight his termination. His actions had been too blatant, too well documented, and too damaging to the department's reputation. Without union backing, his chances of keeping his job were essentially zero. His phone had been ringing nonstop for 2 days. News outlets wanted interviews. The few supporters he had were calling to express their outrage that he was being thrown under the bus. But mostly he was receiving threats. People who had seen the video were sending him hateful messages through every platform they could find. Some threats were serious enough that the FBI was investigating them. Mitchell's wife, Susan, watched him from the kitchen doorway. Their marriage had been strained for years, but this crisis was bringing everything to a head. "The neighbors have been talking," she said quietly. "The Johnsons asked me if it was true. If you really said those things?" "I was doing my job," Mitchell replied, his standard defense. He had repeated this phrase so many times in the past 48 hours that it had become automatic. "Your job wasn't to harass a young woman for sitting in a car," Susan shot back. Her voice carried years of accumulated disappointment. "I've heard you talk, Robert. I've heard what you say about people when you think no one's listening. I've ignored it for too long." Mitchell looked at his wife with surprise. She had always supported him, had always taken his side when complaints were filed. Her change now felt like a betrayal. "The kids are getting bullied at school," Susan continued, "because of what you did. Because everyone has seen that video. Our daughter came home crying yesterday because her classmates were calling you a racist." This hit Mitchell harder than he wanted to admit. His children were paying for his actions. The karma of his behavior was extending beyond just his career. It was affecting his family, his reputation, and his future in ways he was only beginning to understand. Across town, a group of community activists held a town hall meeting at the local community center. Over 300 people packed into a space designed for half that number. The organizers were using Maya's incident as a catalyst to address broader issues of racial profiling and police accountability in their city. Maya had been invited to speak, though she was still processing everything that had happened. When she took the microphone, the room fell silent. Maya looked out at all the faces, seeing people of every age, race, and background who had been moved by her story. She took a deep breath and began to speak. "I never wanted to be the face of this issue," she said, her voice shaking slightly. 2 days ago, I was just a college student picking up my little brother from school. Now I'm part of something much bigger. And while it's overwhelming, I realize that I'm lucky. I'm lucky that I was streaming. I'm lucky that people were watching. I'm lucky that I have an uncle in the police department who could intervene. But what about all the people who don't have those things? What about all the times this happens without witnesses or cameras? The crowd murmured in agreement. Many people were nodding, some wiping away tears. Maya continued, finding strength in her words. Officer Mitchell profiled me because of how I look. He assumed I was a criminal because of the color of my skin. And the scariest part is that he felt comfortable doing it openly, in front of a school, in broad daylight. That tells me this isn't just about one bad cop. This is about a system that has allowed these attitudes to exist without consequences for too long. The applause was thunderous. People stood, showing their support not just for Maya, but for everyone who had experienced similar injustices. The movement that was building around her incident was gaining momentum, and it showed no signs of slowing down. As news of the town hall spread, more details about Officer Mitchell's past began to emerge. Investigative journalists dug into records that had been overlooked for years. They found patterns of behavior that should have resulted in disciplinary action long ago. They interviewed former colleagues who spoke anonymously about the culture of the department and how complaints against officers were often minimized or ignored. One retired officer, speaking on condition of anonymity, told reporters, "We all knew Mitchell had issues. But back then, if you spoke up about another officer, you were labeled a traitor. The code was to protect your own no matter what. That culture is toxic, and it's finally being exposed." The investigation expanded beyond just Officer Mitchell. The Internal Affairs Division was now reviewing cases involving other officers who had similar complaint histories. The Civilian Review Board that had been announced was being formed with unprecedented speed. Pressure from public outrage forcing action that would have taken years under normal circumstances. Maya's livestream had done more than just expose one racist cop. It had ripped open a wound in the community and forced everyone to look at the infection that had been growing underneath. The karma that was unfolding wasn't just about Officer Mitchell losing his job. It was about an entire system being forced to reckon with its failures. 3 weeks after the incident, the police department held a press conference. Chief Williams stood at a podium surrounded by city officials, community leaders, and members of the newly formed Civilian Review Board. The room was packed with journalists, their cameras focused on the chief as he prepared to make his announcement. Maya and her family sat in the front row, along with attorney Claire Thompson. "Today, I am announcing that Officer Robert Mitchell has been terminated from the police department, effective immediately," Chief Williams began. His voice was steady but grave. "After a thorough investigation, we found multiple violations of department policy, constitutional rights, and the oath every officer takes to serve and protect all members of our community, without bias or prejudice." The room erupted with questions from reporters, but Chief Williams raised his hand for silence. "Additionally, I'm announcing a comprehensive reform package that will fundamentally change how our department operates. Every officer will undergo mandatory bias training quarterly. Body camera footage will be automatically uploaded to a cloud server that officers cannot access or delete, and the Civilian Review Board will have real authority to investigate complaints and recommend disciplinary action." These announcements were significant, but everyone in the room knew the bigger question remained. A reporter called out, "Will Officer Mitchell face criminal charges?" Chief Williams nodded to the district attorney, who stepped forward. "The district attorney's office has filed charges against Robert Mitchell for deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal offense. We are also pursuing state charges for false imprisonment and misconduct in office. The FBI has opened a parallel investigation into whether this was part of a pattern of civil rights violations. Mr. Mitchell will be arraigned next week." Maya felt her mother squeeze her hand. This was real. There would be accountability. After years of seeing news stories where officers faced no consequences for similar actions, this felt almost surreal. But the live stream had made it impossible to ignore or downplay what had happened. The evidence was too clear, the public attention too intense. Claire leaned over and whispered, "This is good. But remember, getting charged doesn't mean conviction. We still have work to do." After the press conference, Maya spoke with several journalists who wanted to interview her. She had become more comfortable with the media attention over the past few weeks, though she still found it strange that her life had changed so dramatically in such a short time. One reporter from a national news network asked her how she felt about Officer Mitchell's termination. "I feel relief," Maya answered honestly. "But I also feel sad that it took a viral video for this to happen. How many other officers like him are still out there? How many other people have experienced what I did, but didn't have thousands of witnesses?" Her words resonated across the country. The interview clip was shared widely, with many people praising Maya's maturity and insight. She had become reluctantly a voice for a movement demanding police accountability and an end to racial profiling. Meanwhile, Officer Mitchell was at home preparing for his arraignment. The reality of criminal charges had shaken him in ways the termination hadn't. Losing his job was devastating, but the possibility of prison time was terrifying. His lawyer had been brutally honest about his chances at trial. With the video evidence, the body camera footage showing him deliberately turning off audio, and his history of complaints, a jury would likely convict him. "Your best option is to take a plea deal if one is offered," Michael Stevens had advised. "Accept responsibility, show remorse, and hope for leniency. If this goes to trial, you're looking at significant prison time." But Mitchell's pride wouldn't let him accept that reality. "I was doing my job," he insisted again, though the phrase sounded hollow even to his own ears now. "Robert, we need to talk about your past," Michael said, pulling out a folder thick with documents. "The prosecution has pulled every complaint ever filed against you. They have statements from former colleagues about your behavior. They have social media posts you made under a pseudonym that show clear racial bias. If this goes to trial, they're going to paint a picture of a man who systematically targeted people of color throughout his career." Mitchell's face went pale. He had forgotten about those posts made years ago on forums he thought were private. Someone had connected them to him and turned them over to investigators. The posts were filled with offensive language and expressed views that would shock anyone who read them. Combined with the video of him stopping Maya, they created an undeniable pattern. "How did they find those?" he asked weakly. "The internet never forgets," Michael replied. "Anonymous hackers started digging into your background after the video went viral. They found things that law enforcement then verified. Everything you've ever said online, every complaint that was brushed aside, every time you let your true feelings show is now being compiled into evidence against you." This was the karma Mitchell was facing. Years of unchecked behavior, of using his badge to harass people based on their race, of hiding behind the thin blue line was now crashing down on him all at once. The technology and transparency he had dismissed was proving to be his undoing. Back at the community center, Maya was attending a meeting of the Civilian Review Board. She had been asked to serve as a community representative, bringing the perspective of someone who had directly experienced police misconduct. The board was diverse, including retired judges, civil rights attorneys, community activists, and ordinary citizens who wanted to make a difference. The chair of the board, retired Judge Marcus Washington, outlined their mission. "We're not here to vilify all police officers. The vast majority serve honorably, but we need systems in place to catch and address the ones who don't. We need to restore trust between law enforcement and the communities they serve." Maya raised her hand. "How do we make sure this doesn't just become another committee that looks good on paper, but doesn't actually change anything?" Judge Washington nodded appreciatively at the question. "By using our authority, the city has given us real power to investigate, to subpoena records, and to recommend not just discipline but also policy changes. But we need the community to stay engaged. The moment public attention fades, there's a risk that old patterns will reassert themselves." This became Maya's focus. She used her social media platform, which had grown to over 200,000 followers, to keep people informed about the board's work. She shared updates on investigations, explained new policies in simple terms, and encouraged people to file complaints when they experienced misconduct. She was turning her traumatic experience into a tool for systemic change. Her college classes had become more challenging to focus on, but her professors were understanding. Several had reached out to offer support and extensions on assignments. One professor, Dr. Sarah Chen, who taught sociology, asked Maya if she would be willing to speak to her class about her experience and the broader issues of racial profiling. Maya agreed, and standing in front of 200 students, she shared not just what happened to her, but what she had learned about the systems that allowed it to happen. "Before this, I thought if you just followed the rules and were respectful to police, nothing bad would happen to you. I learned that's not true for everyone. Your skin color, your neighborhood, the car you drive, all of these things can make you a target, regardless of whether you've done anything wrong. The students asked thoughtful questions. Some shared their own experiences with profiling. Others admitted they had never thought about these issues before because they had never experienced them. The dialogue that emerged was exactly what needed to happen. Uncomfortable truths being spoken and heard across dividing lines. Meanwhile, the legal process against Officer Mitchell moved forward. At his arraignment, he pleaded not guilty, still holding on to the belief that he could somehow convince a jury he had done nothing wrong. The judge set bail at $50,000, which Mitchell's family struggled to raise. The shame of having to ask relatives for money while everyone knew why he needed it was another piece of karma coming back to him. The media coverage of the arraignment was extensive. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse, holding signs that read, "Justice for Maya" and "No more racist cops." Some carried signs with the names of other people who had been victims of police misconduct, connecting Maya's case to a broader pattern. The movement her livestream had sparked was growing, not fading. Officer James Park, the young officer who had intervened during the incident, was also experiencing changes in his life. He had been commended by the department for his actions and had become something of a hero in the community. But he struggled with complex feelings about it all. He had worked alongside Mitchell for years without fully recognizing the extent of his colleagues' racist behavior. He felt guilty about that. During a community forum, a young woman asked him, "Why did it take a viral video for anyone to do something about Officer Mitchell? Didn't anyone in the department know what he was like?" Park answered honestly. Some people knew, some suspected, but the culture of the department made it hard to speak up. There was this idea that questioning another officer made you disloyal. That's changing now, but it took this incident to force that change. And that's shameful. His candor was appreciated by the community and marked him as part of a new generation of officers who were willing to challenge the old ways of doing things. The department promoted him to training officer, tasking him with helping to implement the new policies and train other officers in community policing and constitutional rights. As winter approached, 4 months after the incident, the trial date was set for Officer Mitchell. The prosecution had offered a plea deal that would have resulted in 2 years in prison and permanent prohibition from law enforcement. Mitchell's lawyer strongly advised him to take it, but Mitchell, still unable to accept responsibility for his actions, rejected the deal. He believed that a jury of his peers would see things his way, would understand that he had just been trying to keep the community safe. It was a fatal miscalculation. The community had changed. People who might have given an officer the benefit of the doubt in the past had been educated by Maya's case and countless others that had come to light. The jury pool was full of people who had watched the live stream, who understood what racial profiling looked like, and who were no longer willing to accept, "I was just doing my job," as an excuse for violating someone's constitutional rights. The trial was set to begin in January, and everyone knew it would be a defining moment, not just for Officer Mitchell but for the broader conversation about policing and accountability in America. Maya would have to testify, to relive the trauma of that day in front of a courtroom, but she was ready. She had found her voice and her purpose. What had started as a terrifying encounter with a racist cop had transformed her into an advocate for justice and change.